The laughter wasn't the kind that fills a room with warmth. It was the kind that grates on your nerves like nails on steel, echoing off the rocks and telling you exactly how little they thought of you. Kaelin crouched low, the rough mountain stone cold against my cheek, my eye glued to the scope of my pulse rifle. Down below they were arriving, the krill. Their drop pods, like crimson teardrops of arrogance, slammed into the valley floor, each impact sending tremors through the already unstable ground. Even from this distance, you could practically taste their disdain. They were insectoid, all sharp angles and gleaming chitin, their movements too fluid, too sure of themselves for a place they clearly considered beneath them. Vorlag, their commander, a hulking specimen whose carapace shone like polished night, emerged first, and his voice, amplified and distorted by their crude comms, cut through the thin mountain air. "This desolate rock pile, this is the famed Earth." Vorlag's voice was a guttural rasp, vibrating in my chest even through the mountain's shield. "Hardly worth the fuel to get here, Grok." Grok, who I assumed was his second, responded with that chilling metallic chuckle. "Perhaps a minor diversion, Commander. A simple extermination exercise before we claim the real prizes. Even burrowing creatures need to be purged." More krill poured out, weapons bristling, but their posture was almost insulting, relaxed, almost bored. They scanned the rugged peaks around them, but it was clear they saw nothing but useless stone and windswept vegetation. They missed the eyes watching them, the rifles trained on their unarmored joints. Earth's ancient mountains, the silent sentinels of this continent, were met with alien scorn. A crisp, synthesized voice cut through my comm link. "Terrain analysis complete." That was Reese, our tech specialist, positioned further up the ridge, tucked into a near-invisible crevice. "Krill deployment is textbook, perimeter sweep initiated." Their sensor readings are primitive, to say the least. They're not even scratching the surface of what's really here. Anya, my squad leader, her voice calm and steady as the mountain itself, responded, "Reese, hold the commentary. Arrogance is a weapon they wield as much as those blasters of theirs. Don't underestimate them." Anya, lean and lethal, moved through this terrain like a ghost, a force of nature in human form. From our concealed vantage point, we watched the krill fan out, their grating laughter finally fading as they started to set up what looked like rudimentary bases. Efficient, I'll give them that. They moved with the cold, unfeeling precision of machines, but machines that were programmed for flat, predictable landscapes, not the raw, chaotic beauty of Earth. They hadn't accounted for the shadows that clung to the rocks, the hunters who knew every contour of this land, every hidden path carved by time and weather. They hadn't seen us. Orders flashed across my neural implant, concise and cold. Recon Team Alpha 9 Phase 1 initiated. Guerrilla protocols engaged. Remind them why they shouldn't laugh. A grim, tight smile touched my lips. Remind them, I thought, adjusting my grip on my rifle. It was time to show these laughing invaders the true nature of the vermin they so casually dismissed. The laughter was finished. The hunt was about to begin. The first strike was silent, but the aftermath was anything but. Anya's signal, just a subtle shift in her stance, a near-invisible gesture, had unleashed chaos. Reese's avalanche charges detonated with a muffled thud that was quickly swallowed by the mountain's answering roar. Tons of rock and ice, disturbed from their ancient slumber, surged down the slopes. A white-gray wave of destruction aimed directly at the krill perimeter. Below us, the valley erupted. The krill, so self-assured moments before, were thrown into utter disarray. Their metallic laughter, that grating sound of alien confidence, twisted into shouts of panic swallowed by the rumbling avalanche. Their neat, ordered lines dissolved instantly as they scattered, crimson figures scrambling for any scrap of cover against the unleashed mountain. From our high vantage point, Alpha 9 opened fire. My pulse rifle kicked against my shoulder, spitting controlled bursts of energy into the heart of the chaos. This wasn't a full-scale attack, not yet. This was a calculated shock, a demonstration psychological warfare made physical. Focus fire, Anya's voice, calm and precise, cut through the echoing thunder of the rockfall and the rising alien screams. Armor joints, sensor clusters, exposed points, make every shot count. One by one, the Krill's soldiers stumbled, then fell. Their crimson armor, so impressive in formation, proved useless against the pinpoint accuracy of human pulse rifles. Vorlag, that hulking commander, was bellowing orders, his rasping voice carrying across the valley even as the ground shook. He was trying to rally his troops, to organize a counterattack, ordering them to deploy their own heavy weapons. But their weaponry, designed for open plains and structured engagements, was tragically clumsy here. Energy blasts ripped into solid rock faces, shattering stone into harmless fragments, adding to the natural avalanche but failing to touch us, hidden as we were in our mountain fortress. We moved like shadows, ghosts in the falling debris, exploiting every fold and crevice of the terrain. Shift, fire, relocate. We were everywhere and nowhere at once, impossible to pin down. The Krill, weighed down by their heavy armor and rigid doctrines, struggled to adapt. Their advanced technology, their sophisticated sensors, all rendered useless against the oldest weapon in Earth's arsenal, the mountains themselves. A sheer cliff face became an impenetrable shield for us, a tangled thicket of trees, a killing ground for them. The unpredictable mountain winds, swirling and chaotic, played havoc with their targeting systems, bending energy blasts astray. "Report," Anya prompted again, her gaze sweeping over the valley floor, assessing the damage, the panic. "Krill casualties significant," Reese reported, his voice grimly satisfied. "Their lines are breaking. Morale, you can practically taste the fear in their comms. Their disoriented commander, their arrogance, it's gone." I lined up another shot, a crimson figure briefly exposed against a snowdrift, and squeezed the trigger. Another Krill went down, a silent jolt of satisfaction running through me, cold and sharp as the mountain air. "They came expecting a parade," I muttered, almost to myself. They thought they were walking into a garden. They didn't understand, did they? They didn't realize the dirt bites back. The avalanche finally slowed, the roaring cascade diminishing to a rumble of settling rocks. The valley floor was a scene of devastation. Crimson armor scattered amongst the debris, smoking craters where Krill energy blasts had struck, and the heavy scent of ozone hanging in the air. Through it all, the Krill, or what was left of them, were trying to regroup, their metallic shouts now edged with a raw, undisguised frustration. Vorlag, still barking orders, began pushing his remaining forces forward, gesturing towards the mountain slopes, attempting a direct assault, a desperate move to flush us out from our hidden perches. Another mistake, a fatal one likely. "Time to move," Anya ordered, finally retracting her scope, her gaze intense. "Phase 2 attrition. Let's make them understand. Every meter of Earth they try to claim, they'll pay for it in blood." With a silent signal, we melted back into the rocks, becoming one with the mountain once more, leaving behind a valley of Krill disarray and the fading echoes of human gunfire. The metallic laughter was completely extinguished. The hunt, truly, had just begun, and this time the prey was about to become the hunter. Days bled into a relentless rhythm of ambush and fade, attack and vanish, strike and melt away. The Krill presence in the mountains, once a boastful occupation, morphed into a tense, wary watchfulness. They were learning, the hard way, that laughter and armor weren't enough against a foe who knew the land like their own skin. Their initial arrogance had been chipped away, replaced by a grudging, fear-tinged respect for the terrain, but respect, as we knew, wasn't surrender and definitely wasn't victory. Deep within the mountain's embrace, in a network of caves carved out by ancient water flows and repurposed over generations by mountain clans, Alpha 9 found a temporary respite. Zara, the overall commander of our guerrilla forces in this sector, joined us briefly, the flickering lamplight in the cave catching the lines of fatigue etched around her eyes, yet failing to dim the fierce, unwavering spark in their depths. "Reports are filtering in," Zara said, unrolling a holographic map across a rough-hewn stone table, the ancient surface glowing with projected light. "Krill advance is deadlocked. They've stalled completely at the foothills. Their supply lines are stretched thinner than ration packs in deep winter, and their morale, well, let's just say whispers travel faster than laser fire." She paused, a hint of grim satisfaction in her voice. "Vorlag is feeling the heat from their high command. They're not accustomed to delays, and they're definitely not enjoying humiliation. They're demanding a breakthrough, demanding results." Anya, ever practical, leaned closer to the map, tracing the denser Krill patrol routes with a calloused finger. "They are adapting, Zara. Slowly, painfully, but they are. Drone activity is up, patrol density is increasing, especially around known ambush points. They're trying to learn to predict." Reese nodded in agreement from where he was tinkering with a comms array, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Their drone algorithms are evolving, crude but evolving. They're getting better at flushing us out, at anticipating our movements." Zara nodded, her gaze hardening slightly. "They are learning, and that means," she paused, her eyes scanning each of us in turn, "we need to become less predictable, less reliant on the same tactics. The whispers of fear we've sown are potent, but fear alone won't win this. We need to escalate, to push harder, to keep them off balance." She outlined a new strategy, bolder, riskier, a shift from purely defensive tactics to something more aggressive. Direct assaults, lightning strikes against Krill outposts, aimed at disrupting their increasingly strained communication. Networks and sowing outright chaos through their ranks. The next target was a Krill comm relay station nestled deep within a twisting canyon, a vital node in their faltering network. Heavily fortified, yes, but Zara's plan was intricate, relying on misdirection, a feigned weakness, and surgical precision. Alpha 9's part, the diversion. A frontal assault, a deliberately noisy feint to pull the Krill defenders' attention, to draw their fire, while Zara's main force executed the real strike from an unexpected angle, a near-impossible climb up the canyon's sheer back wall. As we moved into position, the atmosphere in the narrow canyon mouth was thick with a different kind of tension than before. Krill patrols were everywhere, their metallic footsteps echoing off the towering rock walls, but there was no laughter now, no swagger. Only a heavy, oppressive silence punctuated by clipped, nervous comms chatter. Their fear was almost a tangible thing, a low-frequency hum in the air, vibrating against my teeth. You could hear it in their terse, coded exchanges, see it in their jumpy, hesitant movements. They were jumpy. Fear of the unseen human enemy, fear of the very earth beneath their heavy boots. On Anya's signal, we unleashed our diversion. Not stealth this time, not silence. A raw, furious barrage of pulse fire ripped through the canyon entrance. Grenades arced overhead, exploding in blinding flashes of light and concussive force. The Krill responded instantly, just as planned, their weapon ports blazing, unleashing a storm of energy blasts in our direction. Their shouts were urgent, panicked, a frantic attempt to meet a threat they couldn't quite locate, couldn't quite understand. We traded fire, hammering their positions, drawing their attention, pulling them deeper into the canyon's jaws, playing our part in Zara's deadly game of misdirection. It was close, far too close. A searing Krill energy blast whizzed past my head, the heat of it singeing my hair. Another struck Reese's shoulder armor, a sickening crunch echoing through the comms, and he grunted sharply in pain, but held his position, firing back with unwavering precision. The air filled with the acrid smell of ozone and burning rock, the canyon walls reverberating with the deafening cacophony of battle. Then, just as the Krill defenders seemed to be fully committed to our frontal assault, the signal came. A soft pulse through our comms, almost imperceptible but enough. Zara's team had hit. The canyon behind the comm relay station erupted in a series of thunderous explosions that dwarfed even our own barrage. The ground shook violently, and through the swirling smoke, we saw sections of the canyon wall collapsing, Krill alarms shrieking in panicked dissonance, a mechanical cry of utter surprise and disarray. The Krill defenders, caught in a brutal pincer, their attention focused on us, their rear suddenly in flames, finally broke. Disciplined lines dissolved into a chaotic, screaming scramble. Confusion reigned supreme, and confusion, we knew, was our greatest weapon. We pressed our attack, pushing forward with renewed ferocity, exploiting their disarray, turning their panic against them. The narrow canyon became a maelstrom of violence, human shouts echoing against Krill screeches, the relentless crackle of pulse rifles, the earth-shattering thud of grenades, the agonized screams of the dying. We fought with a desperate fury, a raw, animalistic drive fueled by the knowledge that every fallen Krill, every second of chaos we sowed bought precious time, bought a sliver more of Earth's survival. As we finally pulled back, retreating into the labyrinthine mountain paths, leaving behind the mangled, smoking ruins of the comm relay station, the Krill comm's chatter, once a metallic rasp of command, was now fractured, hysterical, filled with something chillingly new. Not just fear, not just fruse. Tration, but a palpable terror. Whispers of the impossible human fighters who seemed to vanish into solid rock, who struck from nowhere, who fought like demons in their own land. Whispers of terror, spreading far faster and more effectively than any arrogant laughter ever could. The mountains, once objects of scorn, were now echoing with the sounds of alien fear, and in that echo I heard the faintest but most satisfying sound of hope. The pressure on Vorlag was mounting, a crushing weight heavier than any armor. Krill High Command, light years away, but feeling the sting of this protracted, humiliating stalemate, was demanding results. The mountain region, initially dismissed as a trivial obstacle, had become a festering sore on their invasion plans, a beacon of human defiance burning brighter with each Krill casualty. Vorlag, once radiating obsidian confidence, now moved with a jerky, desperate energy, his carapace dull, almost matte, under the harsh mountain sun. He was becoming reckless, bordering on unhinged. He doubled down on tactics that had already failed spectacularly, ordering wave after wave of frontal assaults against increasingly fortified human positions, stubbornly, almost willfully, ignoring the fundamental terrain advantages that continued to butcher his forces. Captain Jaxar, a Krill officer whose pragmatism was starting to outweigh his loyalty, dared to voice his dissent, his antenna twitching nervously as he addressed his increasingly erratic commander. Commander Vorlag, with respect these tactics, they are unsustainable. We are quite literally feeding our soldiers into a meat grinder. The humans, they are like shadows, anticipating our every maneuver, striking from thin air, vanishing before we can even target them. We are losing, Commander, decisively. Vorlag wheeled on him, mandibles snapping, his voice rising to a guttural snarl that echoed through the command tent. Losing? Krill do not lose, Jaxar. Superiority, force of will, these are what win wars, not evasive maneuvers and cowardly retreats. We will overwhelm them, I say. We will grind them down. We will break their pathetic human lines. We will. His voice cracked, the carefully constructed veneer of confidence finally shattering, revealing the raw desperation beneath. We will show them the might of the Krill. But even to my hidden observers miles away, monitoring their comms traffic, it was painfully obvious. Vorlag's voice lacked any true conviction. His crimson eyes, usually blazing with arrogant certainty, now held a flicker of something far more telling, far more potent. Doubt. Stark, gnawing, debilitating doubt, and desperation clinging to him like a shroud. Zara, ever attuned to the shifting tides of battle, sensed this tremor in the Krill command structure. Desperation, she knew, was a weapon as potent as any pulse rifle, if wielded correctly. She called us in, Alpha 9, along with a hand-picked elite strike force, outlining a plan so audacious it bordered on insanity. A direct strike at the very heart of Vorlag's crumbling command, his mobile command center. Not a static base, but a heavily armored transport, constantly on the move, or so they thought, nestled deep within a treacherous, winding mountain pass. A location deemed by Krill intelligence to be virtually impenetrable. The raid was audacious, yes, bordering on suicidal perhaps, but Zara's eyes burned with that familiar, fierce light of determination that made even the most reckless plan sound like calculated genius. We moved under the cloak of a furious mountain storm, the kind that Earth threw at you with casual disregard, wind howling like tormented spirits through the peaks, rain lashing down in sheets, visibility dropping to near zero. The storm, Anya murmured, watching the sensor readings fluctuate wildly in the chaotic weather, was our ally now, our camouflage, our weapon. Alpha 9, along with Zara and her elite team, navigated the treacherous, rain-slicked paths, the wind threatening to tear us from our precarious footing. Krill patrols were still out there, yes, metallic shapes briefly glimpsed through the swirling rain and mist, but they were disoriented, blinded, their advanced sensors struggling to penetrate the storm's fury. We moved like mountain cats, silent, sure-footed, invisible in the tempest's heart. Then through the driving rain we saw it, the command transport. A colossal, armored behemoth, a mobile fortress bristling with weapon emplacements, dwarfing the canyon pass, a symbol of Krill arrogance stubbornly planted in the heart of our mountains. Zara's signal was sharp, precise, almost swallowed by the wind's roar. The attack was unleashed, swift, brutal, utterly coordinated. Zara's demolition team slammed into the transport's exposed flank, detonating a series of precisely placed explosive charges. The canyon echoed with the thunderous blasts, the transport shuddering violently, its mobility crippled in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. Alpha 9, meanwhile, unleashed our frontal assault, a furious barrage of pulse rifle fire and grenade barrages targeting the forward defenses, drawing the brunt of the Krill response, creating a maelstrom of diversionary chaos, masking Zara's team's final, decisive move. The storm, that wild, untamed force of nature, amplified the pandemonium, flashes of energy weapons momentarily illuminating the swirling rain in blinding bursts, deafening explosions reverberating off the sheer canyon walls, Krill's screams snatched away by the wind, replaced by our own savage war. Rise. Inside the command transport, Vorlag was completely blindsided. One moment, secure in his mobile fortress, the next, utter pandemonium. His comms lines went dead, severed by Zara's team's expert sabotage. He was cut off, isolated, surrounded by the storm's fury and the sudden brutal eruption of human fury. His command structure, already fraying at the edges, finally snapped, communication collapsing, orders garbled, responses non-existent. He fought, of course. Vorlag was no coward. He fought with a desperate, cornered ferocity, his energy weapon spitting death, his massive armored form a crimson whirlwind of rage and futility. But even his berserk fury was tragically, pathetically too late. The raid was too fast, too brutal, too perfectly timed. The trap, sprung with ruthless efficiency, had closed. As we fought our way back out of the ravaged canyon, leaving the crippled command transport behind us, smoking, sparking, and utterly, chillingly silent, even over the storm's din, I felt a palpable, almost physical shift in the very air itself. The tide of the battle, I knew, had irrevocably turned. The Krill comms chatter, once a metallic rasp of frustration and dwindling confidence, was now a chaotic torrent of panic, of terror bordering on hysteria. Vorlag's reckless desperation, his arrogant refusal to acknowledge the true nature of his enemy, had catastrophically backfired. His command was in ruins, his forces scattered and demoralized. Their lines, finally, irrevocably, were breaking. The whispers of fear, first sown in the mountains, had grown into a deafening roar of alien demoralization. The turning point, sharp, brutal, and absolute, had arrived. And the silence that followed, broken only by the storm's dying breath, was the silence of impending Krill defeat. The final Krill assault wasn't an assault at all, not in any real sense of the word. It was more like a broken wave crashing against an unyielding shore, a last, desperate surge of crimson figures scrambling uphill, driven more by fear of their commanders than any hope of victory. Vorlag, stripped of his command center, his lines in tatters, his authority crumbling, threw the remnants of his mountain forces into one final, suicidal charge. It wasn't strategy. It was desperation masquerading as aggression. A final, pathetic gamble to reclaim some semblance of control, to maybe, just maybe, salvage a shred of honor from the wreckage of his campaign. But against human guerrillas fighting in their own mountains, on their own terms, desperation was a blunt, useless weapon. Vorlag's Krill soldiers, exhausted beyond measure, their morale shattered, their formations non-existent, stumbled blindly into a meticulously crafted killing field. Zara's forces, now infused with a fierce, unstoppable confidence, relentless after weeks of hard-won victories, utterly, completely dominant in their own terrain, were waiting for them. They were more than ready. From my hidden position, nestled amongst the highest peaks, I watched through my scope as the final Krill advance shuddered, then faltered, then dissolved into utter chaos. Human pulse fire rained down from the unseen heights, a storm of precise, deadly energy that carved through the disorganized Krill ranks. It was relentless, unstoppable. The Krill, no longer swaggering, no longer laughing, not even shouting now, simply fell. Crimson figures collapsing against the gray rocks, their insectoid limbs twitching uselessly, their energy weapons firing wildly into empty air. Vorlag himself, predictably, was at the very forefront of this doomed charge, a hulking silhouette of rage and futility against the tide of his own defeat. He fought with the berserk fury of a cornered predator, his energy weapon a continuous blaze of light, his armored form a crimson blur against the snow and stone. But even his individual might, his commander's fury, was tragically insignificant against the coordinated, disciplined human defense, against the unyielding, unforgiving terrain itself, against the crushing, inevitable weight of his own monumental failure. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. The last echoes of Krill gunfire faded, swallowed by the wind. The crimson figures ceased to move, scattered amongst the rocks like broken toys. Silence descended on the mountains, a silence so profound, so complete, it was almost deafening. A heavy, thick silence, broken only by the mournful sigh of the wind whistling through the peaks and the soft, almost gentle drip of rain from the dissipating storm clouds. The Krill forces, what little remained of their once arrogant army, were in full, unmitigated rout. Their crimson drop pods, like panicked insects fleeing a collapsing nest, lifted off from the valley floor, leaving dark scars against the pristine white snow as they ascended, fleeing, vanishing back into the storm-bruised sky, leaving behind only the dead, the broken, and the utterly, irrevocably humiliated. Zara materialized beside me on the ridge, as silent and fluid as the mountain shadows themselves. Her face, usually so tightly controlled, was softened with weariness, but her eyes, those sharp, unwavering human eyes, burned with a quiet, undeniable triumph. We stood shoulder to shoulder, two human figures silhouetted against the vast, silent landscape, watching the last of the Krill ships disappear into the storm clouds swirling on the horizon. "It's done," Zara said, her voice low, barely more than a breath, almost lost to the wind. "They're actually gone." I nodded, the weight of the victory settling over me, a strange, complex mixture of elation and a bone-deep, somber exhaustion. Relief washed through me, so potent it almost felt like a physical release. We had survived. We had held, we had won. "The mountains," I murmured, my voice hoarse. "The mountains are silent again." We stood there, side by side, for a long, timeless moment, two small human figures amidst the ancient, imperturbable stone giants, watching as the last tendrils of the storm clouds were swept away by the wind, the first tentative rays of sunlight breaking through the overcast, painting the rugged Betel-scarred peaks in a soft, ethereal gold. Peace, a fragile, hard one, almost unbelievable peace. Zara finally turned to me, a ghost of a smile playing at the corners of her lips, a rare, almost shy expression. "They laughed at our terrain, Kaylin," she murmured, her voice barely audible above the wind's whisper. "They actually laughed at Earth." I met her gaze, a slow, grim smile spreading across my own face, mirroring hers. "Well," I replied, looking out across the victorious, silent mountains, at the vast, untamed landscape stretching before us, forever changed, yet eternally the same. "They won't be laughing anymore." The cost, I knew, had been immense. The fighting, brutal and unforgiving, the loss immeasurable, but we had held our ground, we had defended our home. Not with overwhelming firepower, not with superior technology, but with something far more enduring, far more potent. With cunning, with resilience, with an unbreakable unity, with a spirit forged in the very heart of this unforgiving, beautiful earth beneath our feet. The Krill soldiers had come expecting an easy conquest, their laughter echoing through the valleys, their arrogance blinding them to the true nature of their enemy. They had come dismissing Earth's terrain as a mere obstacle, a trivial inconvenience. But in the cold, unforgiving embrace of these ancient mountains, they had learned a harsh, indelible lesson, a lesson etched in Krill blood and shattered crimson armor, a lesson they would carry back to their own distant, conquered worlds, whispered in hushed tones in their war tents and barracks. Ever underestimate a foe who knows their terrain, who fights for their home, who draws their strength not from empty boasts or arrogant assumptions, but from the very earth they are sworn to defend. The mountains, silent now, stood not just as impassive witnesses to a brutal, hard-fought war, but as towering, eternal monuments to human courage, to human resilience, and to the enduring, unstoppable power of guerrilla fighters when they stand united, on their own land, ready to fight to their laws. Deep breath. And perhaps somewhere out there in the echoing chambers of a defeated Krill commander's heart, a new, grudging emotion had finally taken root, a seed of something akin to respect, born not of fear, but of a hard-won, bitter understanding, a respect forged in the fires of a battle they had never eyed. Imagine they could lose in a terrain they had so foolishly, so fatally underestimated. The mountains were silent once more, but their story and humanity's defiance had just begun to echo across the stars.